everyone. My name is Renee Long, one of the social media specialists and webinar coordinators here at the American College of Healthcare Sciences. Joining me today behind the scenes for all our technical needs is Dominic Aiello, the other social media specialist and webinar coordinator here at ACHS. Today we'll be hosting our fourth webinar in our master lecture series. Each of these lectures features an expert in the holistic health field from the ACHS faculty. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's Master Lecture webinar, Flower Essences, What Are They and How Can They Help? With ACHS faculty member Catrina Mianecki. Just a few housekeeping items before we go ahead and get started. You'll notice that you have a control panel at the right-hand side of your screen. If you have a question during the webinar you would like me to write down for the Q&A, go ahead and type it in the questions box, and I will write those down and ask them to Catrina at the end during the Q&A. And just a small reminder, we are testing out a new teleconference software today, GoToWebinar, as you may have noticed. So please bear with us if we experience any technical difficulties. We're doing our best to make sure the webinar runs as smoothly as possible. You also may have noticed that your line has been muted. We are recording today's webinar, and this helps ensure we can clearly hear our presenter. We will, again, like I said before, have a Q&A period at the end of the webinar. So if you have questions as we go, type them into the questions box at the bottom of the control panel. I will write them down, and I will make sure to read them to Catrina at the end. If you have further questions that may require a bit more research, please feel free to follow up with Catrina directly at katrina.mianecki@achs.edu. She is happy to respond to your questions, but please be sure to give her ample time to get back to you. And now I'll go ahead and turn the webinar over to Catrina, who will give a brief introduction and then begin her lecture.
Welcome everyone to the webinar, Flower Essences. And a little background on myself. I've been involved in holistic health for over 25 years doing different things. I started out doing wellness and nutrition coaching for elite athletes. That was my undergrad, and I did that for quite a few years. And then I moved on into energetic medicines and herbology. I have a certificate from the American College in aromatherapy, and I practice that currently in my oriental medicine practice. So I use essential oils and flower essences, and I've been doing that for over 10 years. So that's a little bit of my background, and I've also been with ACHS for almost 6 years, so it's been an enjoyable time, and I look forward to doing this presentation for everybody. So thank you for joining us. So we'll go ahead and get started. The title, Flower Essences, What Are They and How They Can Help? I'm hoping to try to explain a little bit of that. The world of flower essences and gem essences and the many other essences that are out there is quite varied now. It started out by Dr. Bach, and that's where we're going to start. So there's a lot of information, and I just tried to get together what I thought would be a good basis so it would be understandable for everyone, and they could go on and do their own research. And like Renee said, if you have any questions for me, just feel free to email me, and I will get back to you and help you out or answer your question the best I can. So Dr. Bach, we're going to talk about the Bach flower essences first. And I think it's really important to talk about Dr. Bach and his background because it's quite fascinating. And he was an amazing person, and he is really the one who started the flower essence background. So I'm having a little technical error here. I'm not sure what happened. So okay, so here's a little quote from Dr. Bach. I put some quotes in here because I think it's really important to kind of get an idea of what his background was by his quotes. So his idea of the flower essences was working with people's moods and emotional balance, so that the flower essences would actually work with that, and the person could start healing from an energetic level. But we'll get more into that. So who was Dr. Bach? He was born in England in 1886, so in the late 1800s, and medicine was going pretty well then. They had some good breakthroughs. They didn't have sulfa drugs quite yet, but vaccinations were being worked on and things like that. He trained, so he was an MD. He trained in medicine at the university in London, and his specialty was bacteriology, and he was a pathologist. So he did a lot of research into vaccines, and he had his own research laboratory. And then after graduation, he worked as a house surgeon. So he has a very wide background in terms of his medicine. So he was doing that for a while until about 1917. So he had gone to medical school and was working, and he became very weak and actually suffered from a hemorrhage. And when they took him into the operating room, they found it was a tumor, and they had diagnosed it and gave him 3 months to live. So he was quite sickly at that time. So he was a determined fellow. He returned to his laboratory as soon as he could get out of bed, and he decided to keep working during the short amount of lifetime he had. So he was very dedicated to his vaccine work and his work with bacteria and things like that. So he went on using his own remedies and knowledge of homeopathics, as he was quite trained in homeopathy. And to his surprise and to others' surprise, he began to get stronger. So this was quite interesting, since he only had 3 months to live in terms of what the doctors thought. So 3 months came and went, and he was finding himself in better health than ever. And he thought his idea was, because he had such a sense of purpose, that he really wanted to do some work, and he was very focused on getting that done. Dr. Bach also felt very dissatisfied. He didn't like the way doctors were expected to only look at disease and symptoms and really not the whole person. And he was very inspired to look beyond that and come up with a more holistic approach to medicine. So as he was working with his vaccines in the lab, he started to notice some overlapping principles with homeopathy. And like I said, he was a trained homeopathist, and that was quite common in England during that time. So he started to adapt his vaccines and produced a series of homeopathic nosodes. So basically, a homeopathic nosode is a homeopathic vaccine. They're still out there, they're still being produced, and trained homeopathists do use them. So he continued to go on with his homeopathic work, and people started to refer him as to the second Hanuman, and Hanuman was the father of homeopathy, so that was quite a compliment. His work was very recognized. So up until this time, Dr. Bach had been working with bacteria, but he felt that in order to reach that holistic mode, and he wanted to work with pure and substances that were more natural and less reliant on the products of disease. So he had an idea, and he began collecting plants, in particular flowers, and he was hoping to replace the nosodes with a series of more gentle remedies. So even though the nosodes were pretty innocuous because they were homeopathic, he just felt like he could go another level in terms of being even more natural. So here's another quote: "Healing with the clean, pure, beautiful agents of nature is surely the one method of all which appeals to most of us." So his idea again is working with agents of nature. And he did choose flowers because of their beauty, and he felt vibrationally they were one of the highest botanicals out there to work with. He has used a few other things beside flowers in terms of plants, but flowers are his main and were his main goal. So in about 1928, he kept researching plants and herbs, and he developed the first 3 flower remedies, and that was from impatiens, mimulus, and clematis. So those are all flowers. So he started working with those, and by 1930, that's only 2 years, he was so involved in his work and so enthusiastic. Things are just going really well with the flower research and the flower remedies. He had those 3 already developed, that he actually gave up his medical practice and left London. So that was pretty focused of him to really want to develop those flower essences and this new system of medicine that, you know, he was quite sure he could do and would be found in nature. So Dr. Bach, as he continued, he began to abandon the scientific method, which is sort of the Western medicine thought on treating disease and symptoms, and he started to focus on his holistic model and strengthened his own natural gifts as a healer. So he allowed his tuition to guide him to the right plants. So by 1930, he was out of his practice and really developing his new system. And he went on to travel to Wales, into the Wales countryside, to search out the plants that he wanted to provide in his kind of repertoire of the flower remedies and the natural medicines. So his idea was to treat the primary states of dysfunction in the human psyche. So this was not anything to do with a symptom directly in the body or any anatomical or physiological issues, but more to go into the psyche of the human and what was there causing the dis-ease. So his path toward the flower essence development, first it was trial and error. You know, he was using his intuition, trying to find plants that he felt would address these different emotional issues people had. And little by little, he started to find these plants. And each one of the plants that he found was aimed at a particular mental state or emotion. So again, he was really going toward the emotional basis of illness or disease. And he found through his research and study and case studies that when he worked with these personalities and feelings of the patients, that their physical distress would alleviate naturally. It would go away, and they would be able to be more balanced physically and often free of disease. So what he felt is that the plants and the flower essences actually promoted healing in the body through the psyche. So he was very much into the natural healing state of the body. So this took several years that he was going around looking for the plants, and of course it was seasonal, since that part of the country does have 4 seasons, and they're pretty long in terms of the growing season. Varies in different parts of England, but for the most part, spring and summer, you know, are the best time to look for the kind of flowers that he was looking for to prepare the remedies. So then in the winters, he would be testing out these remedies, the ones that he would come up with, and people started to come from all over after hearing about him, and he was having tremendous success with working with people that did not have success in traditional or allopathic medicine or homeopathy or whatever other things they were trying. So this went on for quite some time. By 1932, I know the dates are kind of going back and forth, but it's kind of giving ranges there. So by 1932, he had now come up with 12 remedies, and the 12 healer flower essences was what Dr. Bach wanted to address the imbalances of 12 archetypal personality types. So he had those all figured out and listed. So those are pretty clear in his mind. He published his work a year later called The 12 Great Remedies, and we'll get to that in a minute. There's a free copy out there online. You can just download it. It's great. They offer it for free, and so it's a wonderful thing to have and learn more about this. He did find that there were individuals that weren't responding to the 12 healers, so he, again, started more work and trying to figure out why that was, and he came up with the 7 more flower essences called the 7 helpers. So here's the booklet. You can get 2 different types rather. There's a newer updated book that has some inserts in it, but this is the original one, how it looked back when it was published in 1933, and I provided that link there for you to go get it and download if you so choose and read it. It's just a little booklet, but it's very interesting, so you can review that again. So by 1934, he was quite busy with his flower remedy research and finding the right plants and working with people in the winter that he hired an assistant, Nora Weeks, and they both actually moved out to his clinic and house in Mount Vernon. And while he was there, he was very inspired, and he found many of the remaining remedies that he needed to complete his series of flower remedies. So they also grew, there's a little picture there of their cottage. They grew a lot of their own flowers. They found them and cultivated them in their own garden. And even to this date, that's the same cottage that's there, and it's just an amazing array of different Bach flowers, or flowers that Bach used in his remedies. So it's pretty interesting. So his primary tenet of his principles, he believed in the importance of emotional disequilibrium, meaning he felt that there were dysfunctions in the human psyche. He felt that that was a primary cause of illness, in that when the psyche was not aligned or in equilibrium, that filtered down into the physical body, and that people then would start seeing disease in the body. So he felt the flower essences could nip the disease or illness in the bud, so to speak, and start working with that part of the psyche that was unbalanced, and then hopefully the physical illnesses would not ever become manifest. So that was his way he worked with the flower remedies, and thought that it would actually be preventative, so to speak, in disease. So the flower essences do not have any side effects. They don't interact with medications, and they're completely safe. So that's a huge added plus to everything. And let's excuse me. So interestingly enough, a year after announcing that he had all the remedies he needed, he had addressed the 12 archetypal psyches of the human mind and emotions, he passed away, which is very interesting. He hadn't even had that book printed out for 3 years, and hadn't even been at the cottage for 3 or 4 years, and he passed away, and he was 50 years old. But the good news was that, I mean, he used his own remedies and what he knew in medicine, and he outlived the doctor's prognosis by almost 20 years. So in that 20 years, he really focused and got his work done with the flower essences. So what he did is he really left behind him a tradition of energetic medicine based on natural substances, and in this case, the flowers. There are a couple that are not actually flowers, but they are all botanicals, or certainly nature related. And so his goal was this quote in the bottom that the work of healing should be published and given freely so that people, can help themselves and um, and help others. So that was his goal. It wasn't to keep it secret. And they're very good about, printing out some of these books and having free information on their website, which is the Bach Center. And I have those links a little later here. So with that, he also felt that health is our heritage as humans, that we have a right to be healthy and to feel complete and in full union with body, mind, and soul. And so the body, mind, spirit medicine, which is the basic tenet of holistic health and medicine, was already being discussed by him when he was looking for these remedies and working with the natural botanicals that he turned into the flower essences. So interestingly enough, I like this last part that says, it's so easy and natural that many people have overlooked it, that they don't think that something so easy and simple could really be a benefit, but that's far from the truth. The flower remedies are extremely helpful, and I've seen them do some pretty amazing things. So how do the flower essences work? Well, this is not only the Bach flower essences. I'm kind of speaking for all the essences, whether they're gem essences or flower. There's a lot of different kinds out there. There's bush essences, Himalayan essences, and they all work pretty much the same way. And they take effect by working with the individual. So, for example, two people might be suffering from headaches, and that each individual might have a different flower essence or a combination that would help them, and that could be two totally different combinations for different people, so that it's a very individualized program when putting the remedies together. So if you have a headache, you don't go out and take such and such, because that might not work for you like it did for Jane, for example. So the flower essences work specifically on emotional conditions of a person. I already mentioned that, and Dr. Bach was pretty adamant about that is the place to start when people are not balanced health-wise, that you start with the emotional condition. The healing and effect of the flower remedies often happen in layers. So, for example, some people, might come up with a couple flower remedies that work great, and they use those for a while, and then they just don't seem to be working anymore. And so that's often a sign that it's time to relook at the situation and perhaps choose some different flower essences. And that's how the healing works in layers. And I've seen it happen, and the only time this doesn't happen as much is with working with animals. They seem to not have the layers of stuff that humans often have. But they have their own layers too, especially if they didn't have a very good bringing up, or they had trauma in their life. So how do the flower essences work? Well, it's basically they work on an energetic level. So everything is vibration and frequency patterns, and so are the flower essences. So they merge to work with the human psyche and transform the negative frequencies or attitudes, you might say, into positive ones, and then that will lead to one's own self-healing process to kick in and start making more positive changes in their health. So again, there are no side effects, and if a person working with the flower remedies chooses a wrong remedy or it's just not the best choice, there's no problem. There's no ill effects because that is just not what the person needs. So the worst case is they don't get any better, but they don't get worse either. So it doesn't interact with any in any way in a bad way. So then, at least Dr. Bach's thought was, after working vibrationally with people and their psyche starting to transform into more positive, in more positive ways, then the physical system can fully engage and its own self-healing process can start, and that helps to fight off stresses and disease and bring the body back into balance. So here's just some pictures so you can picture what these look like. How the Bach flower remedies out there are made a specific way. They're made from spring water, and the flowers are collected. They're infused in water, in the spring water, at a certain, usually in the sun is usually how they do it, but I think they make them year-round now, so sometimes they use the boiling method, kind of like steeping. And they're all hand-produced in England, so I do believe that there are different, I don't want to say factories, but there are other places the remedies are made, and I think they also make them in India, because I have seen them there. So typically the preservation of the remedy once it's made, so the ones you're seeing in the little bottles, they would be kind of like the mother remedy, and you would dilute that down to what you need. Since it's kind of homeopathic already, you don't need a whole lot. More isn't better, so if you're feeling really stressed, you shouldn't really drink the whole bottle of rescue remedy. You can just have a drop or two, and that usually does it. So they are preserved with alcohol, but there are alcohol-free versions for people who don't want to intake alcohol, or for children and pets. So that is available. And down in that bottom picture, you can see that they have a lot of different modalities or different modes of taking it. There's drops, that's what's right in the front. There's a spray. That little can on the left are little like sucking candies. There's a cream that's kind of behind the bottle there to the left. There's a night spray that helps with sleeping. So there's a lot of different combinations, and we'll get to rescue remedy in a minute here. So here's just a few Bach flower essences to help with transformation of, just in general in terms of some things that might be going on. And the most common one is rescue remedy. This particular picture is of the cream, which I find to be extremely handy, especially because you can put it on just the top of your hand. It doesn't, people don't see you drinking or taking a dropperful out of a bottle. It's very incognito. It looks like hand cream. You can put a little dab on your puppy's nose if he's being really crazy or very stressed. So it is really great to have around in terms of application. But rescue remedy isn't one thing. It's a blend of 5 different flower essences, and those Dr. Bach found that they were the best ones to deal with emergencies and crises. And I've used rescue remedy for I don't even know how long, a long time, and I've seen it work on myself and other people and family members and my horses and my dogs, and it's pretty amazing. So it really is very helpful to take the edge off any stress or emergency situations. It's also been used to, like if someone's getting a sore throat, you can put some on the outer throat area, and oftentimes the sore throat goes away. So again, it's working at the energetic level, but that doesn't mean it won't affect the physical level, because it certainly often does. So it's great for last minute exam, nerves, when you're really stressed before you speak to a group of people. and it can be used on your pets as well. So the only uh, probably with cats, I would just be careful if you're using the alcohol-based one. But other than that, you know, a dab on their paw or their nose or somewhere is fine, and it's great for the pets. The 12, here's just a list of the 12 helper flower essences that Bach came up with. And you can see where, for example, chicory is for possessiveness, and maybe a child that just won't share their toys or is just very possessive over things. It turns that quality or that tendency into love of others, selfless love, so that it is transformative from an emotional, mental level. So anyway, these are just a list of the 12 helpers for your future reading and just to have here. But so you can see how each one has a negative tendency and how that, once taking that flower essence, transforms it. And they're just amazing, and they really do have great transformational potential. So they can be mixed. There are ways of mixing things in terms of typically you don't mix more than 7 at a time, because it's thought that that's just too many, and you need to kind of work in that layering system. So the 7 helpers that Dr. Bach came up with after he came up with the 12 healer remedies is they were found to be able to do transformations in people just even on their own. So here's those 7. So here's the Dr. Bach Center is still located in England. There's the Bach Center website, and I encourage everybody to go there and check it out in terms of either on the website or certainly in person. They do tours and things there. So just some information to look at when you get a minute. So the next big flower essence place is the Flower Essence Services, or the Flower Essence Society, and their motto is bridging body and soul. So this has been going on, you know, for quite a number of years, since the early 80s, 79. Richard Katz is the one who founded the organization, and him and his partner really began to run it in like 1980, and there's the website down there for you to go look at when you have some time. It's an amazing amount of work that they've done. They have their own place in I think it's in Nevada City, California. So it's they're still there, and they're still working on the flower essences. So they've come up with their own flower essences, and basically they have continued Bach's work. That's what they feel. And their society has 4 major goals, and to promote plant research and study on the therapeutic effects of flowers and flower essences, to conduct training for people who want to use flower essences in a practice. They do worldwide seminars. It's all over the world, and they do have a publication. I'm not sure it's currently available, but they got very busy at one point, and I think that the publication maybe only comes out once in a while now. And they also like to have a network for practitioners and people who teach, you know, and tie all those people in together, which is a membership part of their website, so that people can share case studies and learn from each other on how the flower essences are being used and how they're working. So it's a great website and society. So how they figured out even more properties of flowers and to use as essence, flower essences. And they did follow a lot of what Bach did, and they chose to continue that research in their own way. And so they have some ways, two primary research methods, and they study the plant, its botanical characteristics, its color and shape and fragrance, and on and on, and where it's located, and they observe the plant in its natural habitat. And then they also use contemplation and meditation on the qualities embodied by the plant to figure out how the flower essence can best help people in a healing way. When they add a new flower essence to their repertoire, they have a way of doing so, and so they do a lot of research. They ask people to try it. They like to see consistent patterns of reports from flower essences from practitioners. So they do a lot of studying and really come up with how this plant, in terms of its flower essence, best works. So from the FES point of view, how does a flower essence therapy work? And they feel that healing of the human soul through the use of, they call them potentized substances made from flowers. So it's the potentized is sort of how homeopathics are done. There's an intent put into the whole flower essence remedy or blend. And so they have a lot of the same thoughts that Bach did in terms of how the flower essences work. And so their research goes on, and they get practitioners to try out the flower essences and work with different people on it, and then do case studies and reports so they can sum up kind of the best way to use that particular flower essence. And they feel like being very receptive to the plant's vibrations is very important, and creates a way for the person to really connect with that essence and thus have healing occur. So they have something called the 12 Windows of Plant Perception, and it's quite in-depth, and that's available to read on their website. But they've come up with 4 major windows of perception for viewing plant qualities, and that's what they look at in terms of making their remedies. And it's just different ways of looking at the plant and kind of building a plant profile, so to speak, of that plant that would be turned into a flower essence. So they have kind of their mode of working with each individual plant. And so some plants will have more color, less color, more, they'll all have different aspects to these windows, but they kind of sum it all up and consider the whole plant, all these different aspects, and then before they make it into a flower essence that would be sold. As I said before, the society puts out clinical reports. You can read those online. They're very interesting in terms of how other practitioners have used the flower essences and the outcomes. So that's just really, really important. There was a depression study done, and some double-blind placebo studies, which I think is awesome, and they were published. So you can see all those on those websites that I provided there for you at your leisure. So top picks. What are the top picks from the Flower Essence Society? The 5 flower formula is pretty close to what Dr. Bach developed for stress and emergencies and trauma, like rescue remedy, but their name for it is 5-flower formula. There's one called Flora Sleep that they have made into a spray, and it's really good for getting staying asleep and sleeping undisturbed. And then another one is Mindful, and that's really great for keeping focused if you need to do an exam or public speaking or whatever. That's a great one for that. And then another good one is Yarrow. It's just an individual flower essence, but it's great for traveling, and it really helps to work with the EMFs and for people who also work long hours at the computer. So those are just some top picks I picked out. The website has many more, and you can sort through that to see what might work for you. Here's just some additional sites. As I mentioned, there are a lot of flower essences out there. There's Australian bush flower essences, desert flower essences, star flower and gem essences. So you can read those, or even an International Flower Essence Conference. So this is worldwide. It's global. Other health practitioners use this in their practices. Like I mentioned, I use it in mine when the need comes up. And so these are just some links for you to check out and visit at your leisure. So that's it, and thank you for joining me in this presentation. And I think now I'm going to turn it back over to Renee, and she can field any questions that you might have forwarded to her.
Thank you so much, Catrina. That was such an interesting presentation. So yeah, we'll go ahead and open it up to questions. I know there have been a couple that have been put into the question box, so I'll start reading those. Our first question comes from Lisa, and she would like to know, instead of diffusing the flowers, can essential oils be used instead?
Well, thanks for your question, Lisa. The flower essences work totally different than essential oils. So they could be more likened to homeopathics than they could to essential oils. So you wouldn't ever necessarily diffuse a flower essence. I'm not sure that answers your question, but hopefully.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, our next question comes from Inga. She would like to know, how would one take the drops? Under the tongue, in a small amount of water, with or without food?
Any of the above.
Awesome. Okay, our next question comes from Mary Ellen, and she would like to know, does coffee nullify the effects of Bach Flower remedies?
It's a very interesting question, and I really, first I want to just say no, but really the flower essences, you have to really be very aware of how they're affecting you or your clients. So for the most part, it shouldn't. Like, I wouldn't put the flower essences in coffee, but if you had them and then you went and had your cup of coffee, I don't think it would really make a whole lot of difference. But if you're a very stressed and susceptible to stress and being very hyperactive, and the coffee is contributing to that, and yet you're taking a flower essence to sort of mellow out that personality trait, then you might want to space them apart a little more. So that really just takes some thought and knowing on either the practitioner's part, or if you're using them personally, just sort of think about that kind of thing. And but no, they aren't. You don't. What am I trying to say? You can you can drink your coffee and have your flower essences.
Nice. Good to know for all us coffee lovers out there. Also, this comes from Bridget. How would one use the yarrow essence while traveling?
That's a great question, and they're in tiny bottles, so you certainly could take them on the plane. You could put a drop directly from that bottle on your tongue, or when they bring you some water on the plane, you could put a drop in the water and sip it, during the plane ride. So either of those would both work.
Interesting. Okay. Bridget also had another question. She would like to know, how does the yarrow essence interfere with the EMF?
Well, that's a really good question, and it would probably take a quantum physicist to answer that, which I can't say I am. But it does have to do. EMFs are obviously electromagnetic fields, and the yarrow, as a botanical and a flower essence, has the ability to disperse the negative effects of EMFs. So that's not a very lengthy explanation, but it's sort of the explanation in a nutshell.
Nice, thank you. Our next question comes from Tiffany, and she would like to know, are you familiar with the Perelandra essences developed by, I'm going to maybe pronounce this wrong, Michelle Smallwright? And if so, what are your thoughts on these?
I am familiar with them, and I do have a link there for Perelandra essences on my little link page before this one. I think that whatever flower essences a person is attracted to use, I think they should go for it.
We have a nice comment from Cindy. She says, I love use and carry rescue remedy with me for everything. I've had excellent results using the essences for pets. So it's good to know. Good for pets. And our next question comes from Sonia, and she would like to know, can one combine the use of flower essences with other therapies like Ayurvedic treatments?
Yeah, I don't see why not. There's actually a few companies out there that use the flower essences even in tinctures. They feel that that's okay, and I have used them myself, and they seem to work great. So I think combining them is fine. I don't know that all flower essence thoughts on that. For example, Bach's, I don't think they promote combining them with anything else because they don't feel it's necessary, but I really think that people have to sort of do what they're intuitively led to do, and I have combined them, and it's worked fine and seemed to really enhance the outcome.
Nice. Okay, so we have another question from Mary Ellen, and she would like to know, what is the normal dosage of diluted flower essence?
It varies. It depends on who, what, and when, if it's for your pet or your horse or a person. But typically, in an acute situation, meaning you need it right away, like right now, you can do a drop or two under your tongue. Otherwise, you can do 2 to 4 drops a couple times a day in water and sip that through, or rather take that in water throughout the day. Some people like to even put it in their water bottle and then sip that water bottle throughout the day, not as their main water, but just as taking the remedy in the whole day. So there are just different ways to do it.
Very cool. We also had another comment referring to travel from Cheryl, and she said, when I fly, I explain that the essential oils and flower essences are medicinal, and I have no problem taking them on the plane. So that's good to know.
Yeah.
For us travelers around here.
I've never had a problem ever. No one's ever asked me about them.
Interesting. Our next question, again, comes from Bridget, and she would like to know, as a parent, would it be all right to administer essences to children with them not knowing about it?
You know, that's very interesting, and I think it's a question that comes up a lot. And I think that has to be resolved from the parent's point of view. I think there's a certain point in which the child becomes of an age where you need to maybe discuss that. But that's, maybe 10, 11, 12. I don't know. There's really no cut and dry, black and white age for that. But if, for example, if you have a 3-year-old and they're having some issues, you certainly could give it to them in their drink. I don't see any problem with that. But the parent has to feel comfortable with that, so it won't hurt them by any means. You just have to feel comfortable. You probably won't be explaining that to your 3-year-old, but when they're 9 and 10, you might need to discuss their behavior. And some people, actually, I have a colleague that put it in her teenage son's water, and she didn't tell him, and she saw vast improvement. And so, it just really depends on the parent.
Wow, that's so interesting. That's funny. Our next question comes from Jessica, and she would like to know, how long does it take to see results? Does the person's diet make a difference in the effectiveness?
You know, I've been working with these for so many years, and I follow up, and some people it takes a while before they notice. Some people, I've had a few that don't notice anything, but then all of a sudden they're speaking differently. I mean, in terms of um, not physically speaking differently, but they're not describing their problems, or they're not really focusing on their health issues. And so when I point that out to them, then they realize, oh yeah, there has been a change. So you don't want to lead the client into, well, you'll change like this or that, because you don't really know. But sometimes people don't really notice changes until you say, huh, well, interesting, last time you talked about your pain, it was like this, but now you're really not even talking about it. So it really varies. It varies how aware the client is, or the person taking them. I often tell people to journal and just kind of keep track of how they're feeling, and just go with that.
Interesting. I guess to kind of add on to that question, Bridget would like to know, how long do the results linger for, and will they ever wear off?
Well, that's a great question. I think if one could live in a bubble, I think the positive aspects would never wear off. But we're out there in day-to-day life, and other things come up and other things happen, and life changes and shifts. And so the remedies help. And then, like I was explaining before in the presentation, that sometimes it's more of a layered healing process. And we all know that life is different from week to week and month to month. And so I think the coping mechanism often changes for the better and for a length of time, but that really depends on the individual. So I don't have any hard, fast answer for that.
Nice, thank you. We have another question from Diane, and she would like to know, I think on a practitioner level, do practitioners work mostly from the emotional stresses of an individual, or do they rely on subtle body indicators, and what would they study in order to work at that level?
I'm not totally understanding the question, but it would depend on what kind of practitioner they are. But for example, let's say a practitioner wants to just learn more about the flower essences and bring that into their practice. Bach's and the Flower Essence Society has a questionnaire, or has their own questionnaires, to figure out what is the best flower essence to put in a blend. So the questionnaires are a great way. You can just give them to the client. You can send them through the email, whatever, and have the client fill it out, and then there's a way of scoring it, so to speak, that the practitioner can then make up the blend based on how the client filled out the questionnaire. So I don't know if that really answers the question, but that is one way to get started, is using those pre-made questionnaires.
Nice, thank you. I think that's all the questions, and we have one more. Hold on. This last one comes from Bridget, and she would like to know, what kind of vocational opportunities are available for a person studying flower essences?
Meaning vocational, meaning jobs?
Yeah, I would think professional opportunities.
Okay. Well, for example, if you're trained in working with the flower essences, most people combine those with a practice they already have. It could be anywhere from, being having some kind of counseling practice, being a wellness counselor, any kind of holistic health practitioner, doing Reiki. Like I said, I use it in my practice. I'm an oriental medicine practitioner. So, I guess there's plenty of opportunities to use it, and in going out, like for example, to look for a job, it certainly would just be an additional modality that you would have experience in using on your resume. So, for example, if you went and worked in the Oriental medicine office, maybe they would, welcome you in as a flower practitioner and work with clients that way. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities out there. Just kind of depends on what the person's background is.
Great, yeah, and I can add a little bit to that too. Here at ACHS, we offer a couple of programs where we include our Nat 202 course, our Flower Essences course, and our programs that include that course specifically are our Associate of Applied Science in Complementary Alternative Medicine. So again, like Catrina said, you know, a CAM practitioner or something like that, you could utilize flower essences. And we also offer the Diploma in Holistic Health Practice online. So I posted those in the chat window for you guys, so you can take a look at that for vocational information. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, well, that's about all the time we have, and thank you so much, Catrina. That was really, really interesting. I myself even learned quite a bit, so thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Okay.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, and I hope everyone enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so thank you everyone for attending. And if you enjoyed this webinar, you should consider looking into ACHS's online course, like I said before, on flower essences, Nat 202, Energetic Modalities 1, Flower Essences Online, and those are typically offered in the spring. And also keep an eye out for an email, which will go out tomorrow with a free recording of today's webinar. And please make sure to say subscribe to the ACHS webinar email list to receive future announcements about our master lecture series. You can also like us on Facebook at facebook.com/ACHS.edu. Follow us on Twitter at the handle ACHS.edu and for future webinar announcements, college events, and holistic health news. Thank you so much again, everyone, and Catrina, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.